Why Fender will not fail. Just what we need, another video about Fender guitars and the ongoing lawsuits and legal battles that they are inflicting upon their fellow guitar builders and retailers. About a month ago, the giant European guitar and music gear retailer Thomanns launched a lawsuit against Fender Musical Instruments over the cease and desist letters that they had sent out to various guitar manufacturers that sold guitars in the European Union. And then just a few days ago, Fender launched its own lawsuit against Thomanns, claiming that Thomanns had infringed upon their copyright. If you recall, back in March of this year, Fender won a lawsuit in a German court stating that the Stratocaster body style was considered a copyrighted work of art. Then, Fender proceeded to go on the warpath and issued cease and desist letters to everyone and their third cousin who manufactured or sold Strat-style guitars in the European Union. And of course, the internet went absolutely wild with all kinds of accusations against Fender and whether they thought Fender was going to go out of business because of all this, or if the Stratocaster style guitar was going to become the exclusive domain of the Fender company. And of course, now we're back to the point where you can't throw a rock on YouTube without hitting a video about Fender and their lawsuits. So I decided to weigh in with my own opinions about this Fender fiasco. Now, I'm no legal expert, but I have seen how these types of lawsuits have played out over the decades with companies like Gibson. Lawsuits are one of those things that can be drawn out indefinitely, and if at first you don't succeed, you can always try again, and again, and again. The Gibson lawsuit against Dean Guitars was filed back in 2019, and that didn't get settled until March of 2025. In that case, Dean filed an appeal and in the end was ordered to only pay a little under $200,000 and of course stop using the Flying V and other Gibson body shapes. Gibson also sued Heritage Guitars over the Les Paul body shape back in 1990. This was 5 years after Heritage began building what some may argue are better Les Pauls than actual Les Pauls. Heritage then sued Gibson in 2020 to get Gibson to stop sending them cease and desist letters. Both sides dropped litigation over that dispute in 2023. Gibson also issued cease and desist letters to the makers of the Trump guitar, remember that one? And also sued Ibanez back in 1977 over their open book headstock design. That was settled out of court. In fact, Gibson has kind of built up a reputation of being very litigious. Unlike Fender, Gibson does have a trademark on their Les Paul, SG, Flying V body shapes, to name a few. But, and here's the kicker, other guitar makers like Heritage are still making them. All the bluster and cease and desist letters from Gibson have not stopped companies like Heritage from making Les Paul style guitars. In fact, Heritage only makes 3 different body shaped guitars. A Les Paul Jr., and an ES335 style guitar. They set up shop in the very building that Gibson was founded in Kalamazoo, Michigan, by former employees of Gibson. So when I say Fender won't fail, I mean as a company and as a brand. Many YouTubers and people commenting on this entire issue often claim that this could ultimately hurt Fender's brand or reputation. Well, dear viewer, I don't think it will. Fender is a legacy brand, and the people that still know and love it are going to continue loving it, no matter if the company goes after other manufacturers or not. In fact, many of the hardcore Fender fans are applauding the company for protecting what they see as Fender's intellectual property, despite the fact that they never defended the right to claim that property in the first place. But many people don't care. They see it as Fender defending their rights. Leo designed those guitars, Fender owns the rights, end of story. The people being critical of Fender are probably the people that weren't really devoted to the company or the brand in the first place. If Gibson can bring up lawsuits against competitors and be known for being litigious, then I think Fender will be just fine. In fact, I would argue Fender may be doing this more for publicity than anything. Fender doesn't have a long history of suing competitors the way Gibson does. Fender is seen as maybe more reserved or sophisticated than Gibson, whereas Gibson maybe has more of a bad boy image. It's quite possible that Fender wishes to shed that squeaky clean image. It could also be their new CEO simply has no idea how to run a large company. Legacy brands like Gibson and Fender don't usually go out of business because of lawsuits. They go out of business because people stop buying their products, or they fail to stay current. Maybe Fender sees all this as a way to stay in the public eye, to stay relevant. If they lose their lawsuits, they still win. They gain notoriety and they possibly paint companies making Stratocaster copies as the bad guys. Now, I don't see Fender winning the case against Thomann, and if they do, all Thomann and the other manufacturers will need to do is slightly alter the shape of their guitars the way makers of Les Paul style guitars do. Then it becomes a game of how close to the shape of a Stratocaster can I get before it raises alarm bells. I think brands like PRS can make a fairly strong argument that the Silver Sky is pretty different from the Strat. And who knows, maybe Fender will win. But again, that doesn't mean they've won. Companies will likely appeal, and these things can be dragged out in court for years and years. In the meantime, the competitors, unless they're super small and can't bear the legal costs, will just continue to sell Strat-shaped guitars. So what do you think? Do you think this will hurt Fender in the long run or not? Do you think brands like Fender and Gibson have had their time and are now facing an uncertain future? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.